So I finally got around to watching HBO's newest Game of Thrones spinoff, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. And unlike House of the Dragon, I went into this one completely blind. I hadn't read the books, and I didn't really know anything about Dunk and Egg beyond the small Easter eggs the original Game of Thrones had sprinkled throughout its run. Still, I was excited to step back into the world of Westeros. Now, what I didn't expect was how quickly Dunk's story would resonate with me. And after just 6 episodes, I realized that at its core, his story is about the underqualified dreamer. Someone stepping into a world that feels far bigger and more experienced than they are. And with where I am in life right now, that hit close to home. As a creative trying to break into the industry and facing rejection after rejection, while also watching the world around us spiral into its own chaos, I couldn't help but see pieces of myself in Dunk's story. Once I noticed the parallels, the show started hitting in a completely different way. Now, you're always supposed to root for the hero in stories like this, but with Dunk, for some reason it felt more personal for me. I found myself genuinely hoping that he'd have some kind of breakthrough by the end of the season. Instead, the show gives us an ending that, while yes, it's a bit grim, it's strangely uplifting in a very honest way. And in a way that made it resonate even more. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms ended up becoming a surprisingly special story for me. And today, I want to talk about why. There's a moment that happens when you start chasing a dream. At first, it feels exciting. You romanticize it even. The idea of doing the things you love, the thing that you have always imagined yourself doing, it carries a special kind of childlike magic, if you will. And that's most likely because when you're younger, especially, that path feels wide open. Creativity feels effortless and limitless. Ideas flow easily. And you assume that if you just keep following that feeling, eventually you'll arrive at the life that you had imagined. And then one day something shifts. Adulthood arrives and brings this unhealthy dose of cynicism and realism. You look around and you realize that the world you're trying to enter is filled with people who seem impossibly ahead of you. People seemingly with more talent, more experience, more connections, and the biggest one, more confidence. Suddenly, that dream that once felt natural begins to feel intimidating. This is the moment where many people find themselves quietly stepping away from what they wanted. But it's also the moment where the story of Dunk, our unlikely hero of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, became deeply resonant for me. Because as we see throughout the series, Dunk lives in that moment. He's nowhere near the kind of hero fantasy stories usually give us. He isn't some kind of prodigy or chosen by prophecy. He isn't especially skilled compared to the noble born knights around him. As a matter of fact, Dunk spends much of the story feeling like a fish out of water that's in way over his head. Now, when Sir Arlen dies and Dunk decides to continue traveling as a knight, he isn't stepping into a destiny that he was trained his entire life for. He's stepping into a role that feels slightly too large for him. And that's because Westeros is a world full of adored knights, noble houses, and people who have spent their entire lives preparing for the roles they occupy. Knights are supposed to be these paragons of high skill, honor, and lineage. They're trained from childhood, learning from the best at a young age, with their reputations later being built through countless victories and these grand tales. But then we get Dunk, who's a former orphan from Flea Bottom, who's not necessarily the sharpest tool in the shed. He has the size and the strength, yes, but compared to the noble born knights he encounters, he often feels painfully out of his depth. He makes mistakes, he misjudges situations, he doubts himself constantly, yet none of that seems to deter him. He keeps moving forward. And that's the part of Dunk's story that felt incredibly raw, because for many people pursuing a dream, that experience is familiar. Creative pursuits often begin with a feeling rather than a plan. Maybe you loved drawing as a kid. Maybe you were the person who was always writing stories, editing videos, designing things, or imagining worlds in your head. Creativity felt natural. It felt like a piece of who you were. But adulthood shifts that perspective. Responsibilities appear, jobs demand more of your time and energy, the world becomes more practical, more transactional, and you find that the thing you once loved doing freely starts to feel like something you have to justify. If you want to pursue it seriously, suddenly you're competing in a space where other people have years of experience, formal training, or the kind of confidence that only comes from being deeply established. And in those moments, the same thoughts creep in that Dunk probably had walking among knights who have fought hundreds of battles. What am I doing here? It's the voice of imposter syndrome. It tells you that you're behind, that you started too late, that other people are simply better equipped for the path that you're trying to walk. It's easy to imagine Dunk feeling that exact pressure when he enters a tourney field surrounded by renowned warriors. Men who have had armor polished to perfection, weapons crafted by master smiths, and reputations that precede them wherever they go. And then there's Dunk, who could barely afford proper armor with not even a house sigil to his name. But I found that that's what makes Dunk's story so impactful, because it isn't about suddenly becoming the best knight in Westeros. It's about continuing forward despite that uncertainty. What makes Dunk compelling isn't his skill, it's his character. Time and time again, Dunk shows that he understands the idea of knighthood more deeply than many of the knights around him. In a world where titles and appearances often matter more than principles, Dunk keeps trying to live up to the ideas that knights are supposed to represent. At the end of the day, simply put, he's just a good dude at his core. He protects people who have no one else, challenges injustice even when it puts his very life at risk, and he struggles constantly to do what's right, even when doing so might cost him everything. The irony is that the more powerful knights in Westeros often treat knighthood as a performance, a symbol of status or authority. Dunk treats it like the actual responsibility that it is. And because of that, the question of whether he was truly a knight becomes irrelevant. Now, I don't think we ever saw him get knighted, but by the end of the series, you couldn't tell me otherwise that he wasn't a true knight. He's constantly trying, no matter how many people feel the need to belittle and demean him. And that effort, that persistence in the face of constant doubt, is what makes him worthy. Now, there's something that's quietly profound about a character who doesn't know if he belongs, but continues forward anyways. For many creative people, the pursuit of their dream can feel exactly like that. You start a project without knowing if anyone will care. You share your work while wondering if it's good enough. You apply for opportunities that feel slightly out of reach. And every time you do, there is a chance that you will fail. And in today's climate, the internet can amplify that feeling. You look at and compare yourself to creators who seem miles ahead of you, artists with these incredible skills, writers with massive audiences, filmmakers producing work that feels impossibly polished. It's easy to feel small in comparison, but Dunk exists in a world filled with people who are also larger than life. The difference is that he doesn't wait until he feels ready. He moves forward anyway. And the strange thing is, the first time I watched the scene where he signs up for the tourney, I felt this sudden pit in my stomach, and it caught me completely off guard. My first thought was, oh my god, he is not ready, that he was going to embarrass himself. And I even questioned why he was so eager to jump in when the gap in skill between him and the other knights was so obvious. Now, in that moment, I really had to stop and ask myself why that was the first place my mind had went, why my instinct was to doubt instead of admire what he was doing. And it made me realize just how cynical my thinking had become. But watching Dunk's journey felt strangely comforting because it reframes what bravery actually looks like. Bravery isn't always confidence. In fact, sometimes bravery is the exact opposite. It's continuing to try even when you suspect that you might not measure up. It's standing in the same arena as people who seem better than you and refusing to leave simply because you feel outclassed. Now, I remember talking to my dad when I decided to pursue an art major, and him explaining to me that in taking a creative path, it would be one where I would have to fight for my standing. Years later, and I find myself in this very position. Sure, there have been highs. Every now and then, an artist you admire notices your work online, and without realizing it, gives you a moment of validation that carries you for weeks. But there is also long stretches where you find yourself wondering why you were given these gifts, only for them to take you nowhere. And that's why Dunk resonated with me so deeply. More than anything, it was his persistence in the face of adversity, that ability to keep going. Dreams rarely unfold the way we imagine when we're young. Life complicates them, time stretches them out, the path becomes messy, unpredictable, and a lot of the times discouraging. And there are long stretches where it feels like progress has stalled, or that the spark that had once fueled you has now faded. But Dunk's story is a reminder that the journey itself still matters. He isn't chasing glory the way most knights are. He simply is trying to live up to the ideas that he believes in, one imperfect decision at a time. Each step forward is uncertain, sometimes clumsy, often overwhelming, but it's still forward. And the truth about dreams is that they rarely belong only to the people who are most prepared. More often, they belong to the ones who refuse to stop showing up. In a world full of legendary warriors and noble houses, Dunk stands out precisely because he isn't extraordinary. He doubts himself. He's inexperienced. He's in over his head. But he keeps going. And sometimes that persistence is the most heroic thing there is. Because chasing a dream can feel a lot like riding into a tournament you probably can't win. The odds are uncertain and the outcome is never guaranteed. But somewhere inside you, there's still a voice telling you to try anyway, to get up out of your slumber. Dunk listens to that voice. He tightens the straps of his armor, climbs into the saddle, and rides forward. Not necessarily because he knows he'll succeed, but because the attempt itself matters. And for anyone chasing something creative, something uncertain, something deeply personal, that kind of courage can be incredibly inspiring. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoy these kind of video essays, as always, feel free to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you were really feeling it, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.